NOTSTOCK, we would like to thank many entities that help fund and support this arts event. First, a tip of the hats to many MSU departments, faculty, staff, and students who make this event possible. None of this would happen without their dedication to the arts, Minot, state, and the community. We would also like to thank the following for their generous support: Hampton Inn, Verendrye Electric Cooperative, Northwest Arts Center, North Dakota Art Gallery Association, Flat Tail Press, Speedball Art, Prairie Public's Great American Folk Show, and finally, a special thank you to you who are here. This year we are honored to have Tama Smith as our NOTSTOCK guest. Smith has worked as a professional potter since 1988. Since 1995, she and her husband have run Prairie Fire Pottery in Beach, North Dakota. She works primarily in stoneware clay using a variety of production and glazing techniques. Her work is prized for its vivid and complex colors produced from original glaze recipes, each made from scratch. This combination of original glaze recipes, a unique style of glaze application, and the painstaking precision with which she coaxes color from the firing process is what gives Prairie Fire Pottery its distinction and unique standing in the marketplace. Her work has been exhibited throughout the U.S. and internationally. It has also been carried in the gift shops of the Whitney Museum of Art, Field Museum of Natural History, the Smithsonian National Museum, Disney World, Yellowstone National Park, and other venues. Tama is providing ceramics demonstrations outside the Student Center while at NOTSTOCK. Her work is on display in the Northwest Arts Center, and there is work for sale in the Northwest Arts Center and at her table outside the Beaver Dam. Welcome, Tama.
Well, I don't have anything more to say. She said everything. Maybe I shouldn't touch that. Okay, I'm so glad you're here. I'd like to play a little video piece. It was a promotional campaign called Come Meet My North Dakota. It was produced by North Dakota Tourism to highlight small businesses in North Dakota. And it's a quick introduction to my world after that wonderful introduction that Linda gave me. So, I get the question all the time, what the heck are you doing in Beach? There's so few of us humans out here that each of us can make a ripple. I'm Tama Smith, and I'm a potter. I'm the owner of Prairie Fire Pottery. The land and sky of North Dakota has a huge influence on my work. There's the red scoria, Little Missouri running through the Badlands. What I like about having a shop in Beach, I get to meet the customers that will have my pottery in their life. One time there was a woman came in, her husband was sick, and she said, I don't think he's going to make it through the week, so can you make an urn for him? So I made the urn, I quick dried it. He passed while I was making the piece. I took the piece out of the kiln that morning. It was still hot. And by the end of the funeral, they put the urn in the ground. I feel it's such an honor to make something for someone. Then the piece becomes even more like a personal connection to them and their travel and their life. I'm Tama Smith. Come meet my North Dakota.
Introducing the all-new Vault from NOTSTOCK. It's what's inside that inspires.
A segment of Tom Brousseau's radio show, The Great American Folk Show, and this will be audio only. He came and interviewed me in the studio this summer, and I love the description of his kiln firing. And Tom will be performing tomorrow night at the Atypical Brewery at 8 o'clock, so if you can come to that, that would be wonderful. And so I'd like to play Tom Brousseau's opening.
That's the sound of a kiln at 2200 degrees. This temperature will increase to 2400 over the next little while, at which point setting a glaze on the pottery inside and melting that glaze, melting the rock materials in that glaze. On another note, I'm just about 10 feet away from the kiln, and it's practically how hot the wings of a spaceship get when re-entering the Earth's atmosphere. Just think of that. The heat from where I stand is more than just hot. It's powerful and pulsating. I'm in Beach, North Dakota, at the studio of Tama Smith and her Prairie Fire Pottery. We're in the kiln room. And speaking of temperature, the day today is a warm one. At 8 a.m., it was a very warm day already. But it's not that warm. In the kiln room, there's fans going to help move about some of that hot kiln heat. But it feels good, like sauna good. Standing here in the kiln room, it's 100 degrees. And the body can't help but just feel comfortable. You get goosebumps, actually, like when you do coming in from a cold day and sitting next to a fire. And the smell in the kiln room, I just have to tell you, kind of smells like science class in the junior high when you first light that Bunsen burner for experiments. Like a combination of old textbook and wet cement and just a tish of dustiness. Tama Smith now resides in Beach, North Dakota with her husband, Jerry. This is where she works, where her shop is, Prairie Fire Pottery. Her husband, he was there earlier today, manning the shop. Before I visited with Tama, Jerry helped me pick out a gift for a friend. This friend of mine is building a bar, a home bar. So I thought, let's add a little color. So I found a blue vase about the size of a coffee mug, blue with mostly sapphire blue and Yale blue. The glaze here and there a powdery blue is the perfect item to bring a little color to the leathers and tobaccos and cognacs of my friend's home bar. My visit with Tama Smith was to find out more about her background as a potter, how she came up with the name for her business, Prairie Fire Pottery. And then, it's just kind of fun sitting down without any big agenda and just seeing where the conversation goes. So the title of this segment is A Visit with Tama Smith at Prairie Fire Pottery Studio in Beach, North Dakota.
So I'm going to tell you a little bit about my pottery. I'm going to tell you a little bit about my background as a potter and how I came up with the name Prairie Fire Pottery. And then I hope we can have our own discussion. And so I hope you have some questions at the end. So let's start. There we go. The man is coming. Get closer to the microphone. Okay.
We can make your PowerPoint full screen. Is it full screen?
Okay.
Ooh, that's strange. It's almost reading it backwards. It's reading it backwards. I'm not sure why. It wants to make this is the or can I swap? Let's try that again here. This didn't happen when we first started.
Up top there's a button that says swap displays. Maybe try that. Can't see them.
Can you see my mouse? Da, da, da.
There we go. All right, well, thank you so much for saving my life. So I've been a full-time working potter for 33 years. But for the last 26 years, my studio and showroom, Prairie Fire Pottery, has been located in the little town of Beach, North Dakota on the Montana border. That's on I-94. So we've got maybe 400,000 people that travel by our exit every day or every year. So most of my people that come visit me are travelers passing through the state. My showroom is a vintage 1907 Main Street storefront, and our little shop has welcomed over hundreds of thousands of visitors for the last 26 years. I love meeting the people that will have my pottery in their life. I love that human connection. I work mostly in stoneware clay, and all my glazes are made from scratch, ground rock and water, and they're lead-free and safe for food, and so they're completely functional. My pottery is high-fired in a reduction atmosphere, and I'm a fire potter. I love the firing process, using flame, and I love firing the kiln most of all. So, as Tom said earlier, 2,400 degrees is the temperature the space shuttle reaches upon re-entry into the Earth's atmosphere. Cone 10 is a temperature range not usually associated with the production of color. It's better known for its strength and durability. But I strive to produce rich, vivid colors at that temperature. At 2,400 degrees, the glazes become molten, and they begin to flow and blend into beautifully complex patterns. At that temperature, the clay and the glaze become one very deeply. My work is inspired by the skies and the landscape of western North Dakota. So I see in glazes of the sky above and below, and the oranges and the yellows, and then I try to record that onto my pieces. And sometimes we like to photograph the pieces against the prairie and the Badlands. If you've been to the Badlands, you know that when the rain falls down on the buttes, it makes this rivulet in the buttes, and so I'm trying to capture that in the dark part there, of looking like the rivulet buttes. And that texture on the butte, the clay, of the butte, I'm trying to capture that texture in the glaze as well. So if you think, if you're under the impression that pottery is a glamorous or relaxing job, you need to visit my studio when I get a 2-ton shipment of clay in. The clay weighs 50 pounds a box. So and I use a variety of production techniques. I mostly hand build and wheel throw and press. And then the first firing is the electric kiln, and that's about 1,800 degrees. And then the pieces emerge from there as bisqueware, and then they can be glazed. And I use ladles and small squirt bottles. So I lay down the glazes, and then once they're all glazed, then I put them in the big gas kiln. So my life as a potter began long ago in Grand Forks. In 1984, I was working in an advertising career that I didn't really like. And I kept asking myself, what do I really want to be when I grow up? And one evening I was sitting next to this eternal flame sculpture on the campus of UND, and I said to Jerry, my significant other, I want to transfer to the art department, and I want to study clay. And I want to make a life, not just a living. So I spoke it out loud. And he thought it was a good idea. Not long after that, so the next day I went and transferred to the art department. Not long after that, this man rocked my world. This is Keisuke Ueno. He was a Japanese master student who had arrived at UND to study ceramics. And one day, before I had met him, I walked into the studio, and here were these magnificent, large, beautiful bowls that he had thrown earlier in the day, and I knew that I had to work with this person. And as a bonus, his significant other, Ragnhild Stuberg, herself a very accomplished Norwegian potter, came on extended visits to work with us too. And Kay gave me great advice. He said, all potters can make mugs and cups and bowls and vases, but what you put on the outside of it makes it your own. So take the time to develop your own glazes so you have a uniqueness. So we worked hard and we made lots of pots and developed and tested lots of glazes. And I found my love of firing kilns and high fire reduction. On another time at UND, a visiting artist came, and I asked him, how do you become a working artist? And he said, never eat your pots. If you need a job to pay for your food and rent, then you have one on the side. But whenever you sell a pot, take that money and put it back into your studio to buy more equipment and supplies so you can make more pots. And then one day, your pots will feed you. And that was great advice, and that's exactly what I did. In my senior year at UND, North Dakota Horizons magazine came around and interviewed some of us, and this is what they wrote. Tama Smith is a senior in visual arts and put 10,000 miles on her car during the last 2 summers, displaying and selling her ceramic pieces at art fairs throughout the Midwest. And this is the important part. Eventually, she hopes to have a studio on the plains in western North Dakota. So I spoke it out loud again. Words have power. I didn't know exactly how I was going to do it, but I was determined to make my own life. So in 1988, I graduated from UND with a Bachelor of Fine Arts, and I married Jerry that same year. He has been at my side working to make our pottery business a success from day one. After graduating, I needed a studio to work in, and I was advised to go to the graduate school that pays you to be there. I went to Michigan State to work on my master's. Michigan State and East Lansing offered me a paid studio tech position, and I gladly accepted. Now I had a studio to work in and a paycheck, but I left after a year, eager to get on with making my life as a potter. Jerry took a job in Detroit, so we didn't have to eat our pots, and I set up my first studio in the basement of a 3-story Victorian house where we lived in the inner city of Detroit. In Michigan, there are a lot of potters, so trading and buying used equipment was a great way to build my studio. So I bought a used wheel, that wheel. That's still my only wheel today. But to finish my studio, I needed a gas kiln. So I traded my skills as a potter in exchange for access to other people's gas kilns. I helped build their kilns, I mixed their clay and glazes, and in exchange, I got to fire my work in their gas kiln. And eventually, I traded for a stack of hard bricks and 4 Venturi burners, so now I could build my own gas kiln, which I did in the alley in our inner city Detroit home. And Jerry continued to work his job during the week, and I continued to make pottery. And on the weekends, we would haul our pots around the eastern side of the country, selling at art fairs in Massachusetts and Pennsylvania and Ohio and Michigan. And this was our setup doing art fairs. You see all those people, everyone has a white tent, and we didn't want to look like everybody else. So the sun shined on the pieces, and the pieces looked so much better with the sun shining on them. And if it rained, then they became rain gauges. And but what I learned at art fairs is that there's this core group of people out there in the world who love pottery. You can just tell the pottery lovers when they walk into your space, their eyes light up, they want to touch the pieces. But getting into reliable art fairs, getting into good art fairs is unreliable. One year we did this fantastic art fair, did really well, and then the next year we got juried out. So we made the most important decision for our business that we've ever made. We decided that no longer were we going to let others decide if we were good enough to sell in their venues. And we were going to create our own venue where we would show and sell every day. And that's what Prairie Fire Pottery is. It's our own venue. But we needed time and money to get there. So we created 2 wholesale lines that Jerry could help make, so I didn't have to make every single piece myself. The first line was pop art. I had learned mold making in a sculpture class back at UND. So we found antique pop bottles and slip cast the beautiful old shapes and glazed them in our high-fired colors. Pop art, like Linda said earlier, was sold at the Whitney Museum of American Art in their gift shop. And next we came up with a line called Wild Tracks, where we would cast actual animal tracks and then recreate the track in the tile in terracotta. And our collection included both North American and endangered animal tracks. And we sold at wholesale shows in New York and Chicago and Dallas and Denver and LA and Seattle. And both lines were very popular with the gift shops and nature gift shops and mail order catalogs, remember those? Pre-internet. So these wholesale lines enabled us to move back to North Dakota, and they provided a steady income while we slowly built up a retail trade with Prairie Fire Pottery. And it allowed us to do things like acquire property and lease billboards on the interstate. About this time, the Woodland Park Zoo in Seattle called us to make a tile of their newest edition, Nadiri, a 2-month-old western lowland gorilla infant. So I went to Seattle and pushed her little hands and feet into clay, and then I was able to pour the plaster into the impressions and then make a tile for her back foot, and then they sold her tile in the zoo's gift store. In 1994, we bought the little storefront, the little Main Street storefront in Beach. And on June 6th, 1995, I had my own beach landing. And if there's any history enthusiasts out there, you might know the date of June 6th and other beach landings. So it became our all-in-one retail store and our studio and our home. And out back, I was able to build my second gas kiln. But what should we call our new North Dakota business? Back in Michigan, my business name was Tama Pottery, because I signed Tama on the bottom. But in North Dakota, I wanted a name that would include Jerry and interns and employees. And I happened upon the words Prairie Fire. So if you've been out to the Badlands, you know that those black lines in the buttes are coal deposits. And so when the lightning strikes the prairie on fire, the prairie fire burns and then starts those coal veins on fire. And those coal veins will burn for eons into the earth, and that's all bentonite clay on the top of the butte. And so as those coal veins are burning, it's firing the clay on the top. And if you've seen the buttes in the Badlands, you know that there's that red scoria that is in the buttes too. And that scoria is naturally fired clay burning from the burning coal vein. And so I thought that was a perfect name to name a pottery out in western North Dakota. So since you're doing pit firing today, when we got to our new little town, I wanted to start a tradition that could also be a fundraiser. And so after New Year's, Christmas trees, which were once honored guests in our home, are unceremoniously kicked out to the alley and out on the curbs. And I thought that was sad for the Christmas trees. So I thought, well, gather up all the Christmas trees, dig a pit, put the pots in the pit, and have a giant community bonfire. And there was an artist in town that was inspired by the first Christmas tree bonfire, and so he painted this painting for it. And so we had chili and hot chocolate, and we gave the trees a beautiful send-off, and the fired pots were then auctioned off and donated to the local ambulance and the firefighters. And the fire department in Beach, they call themselves the Sons of Beach. So for 14 years, we did the Christmas tree bonfire, and then we raised thousands of dollars. And then in 1999, we launched our first website in 1999, which was a long time ago. So prairiefirepottery.com, and now we had a web presence as well as a brick and mortar store. Also, in 1999, we bought the second building, which is my studio. But this beautiful structure was built in 1909, but it was originally a farm implement business. And then it was a hardware store, and then it was a grocery store, but now it's a pottery studio. It's 100 feet long and 50 feet wide and 2 stories, and best of all, it has gas to the building, so I could build my dream kiln. My first 2 kilns were outside, and this one was going to be in a big wood building. And so in 2007, I found a master kiln builder who would build it on site in the studio. So I didn't have to worry about burning down that big wood building. And this is a gorgeous kiln. I am in love with this kiln. My work has always been a collaboration between me and my kiln. All the work I do to get up to the glazing and the throwing and everything is to get to the point where I can fire the kiln. That's my favorite part, is starting a fire in the kiln. So I lay down the glazes in what I think might be an interesting pattern, and then I turn it over to the kiln, and that will either make or break the piece. So with a gas kiln, most potters work in an electric kiln, and that heats up and cools down, but with a gas kiln, there are numerous decisions that you have to make during the process of firing. There's the air to gas ratio, the shape and color of the flame, and the amount of the back pressure of, but most importantly, for the production of color, I'm pursuing the ever-elusive reduction atmosphere. And it's a balancing act between too much and not enough in this kiln. So I don't have any kind of controls on the kiln. All I have is gas and air. And so everything is by feel. I don't have an oxy probe or anything like that. I fire completely by feel. I do have safety equipment on the kiln, but I don't have things to guide me. It's all by the years of firing. So let's see where I'm at. Reds are the hardest glaze to control. So if you get too much oxygen in the kiln while you're firing, you can open up the kiln and not have a speck of red on the piece. And that's really heartbreaking, to go through all that work and not have any reds turn out. So most potters don't work in high fire reduction just for that reason, but I enjoy the challenge. And I love that human connection that happens when someone loves a piece of my pottery and wants to take it home and have it in their life. The last thing I do when I'm finished glazing the piece is I put 3 dots on the piece. It's a hello to that person who will have that piece in their life. And this summer I got an email from a man who was traveling through Ohio, and he stopped at an antique mall and he found a vase that spoke to him, and he said, "I just had to take it home." And he Googled the name on the bottom, and he contacted me. And so I told him about the 3 dots on the piece, which he found on his piece, and I told him that that was a hello from me to you. And my mother asked me before she passed, "Did you ever think you'd get this far in your pottery?" And I immediately answered yes. In the beginning, I didn't know how I was going to do it, but I always believed I would make a life for myself as a potter. So remember, nothing in life will pay off more than persistence. And this is a wall in my kiln room. I'm getting all emotional here. So my first intern, Amanda, she went on to have a pottery business of her own, asked one day if she could paint something on my wall. And she painted the words, "It's not a job, but a way of life." So she listened well. So my advice, whatever you want to be when you grow up, find your uniqueness, be persistent, and make your own life. And if you find yourself in western North Dakota, stop in Beach, North Dakota, and come see me. And I'd be happy to give you a tour of my studio and show you the kiln. Are there any questions? Yes?
I was just wondering, it really struck me when you played the introduction to the radio show. Did you give him, like, some of those words? Or, that is amazing because I walked into the film room today, like this morning, and I went in there and I, like, immediately relaxed. I was like, oh, it's so nice and warm in here. And I noticed the smell too. Isn't that such a coincidence? Those are the exact thoughts that I had this morning. And he said the exact same thing.
Yes, when he played that segment to introduce and then we went on to have a discussion and things like that, I was so amazed because I don't smell it anymore, you know? And so when he said that, I said, that's exactly right. And I just had to play it for you because he said it so well.
Yeah, you really did describe it.
Yeah.
Like how true it feels.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
I plan on coming by and seeing the studio.
Yay, please come by. Yes, please come by.
At least once a year.
Yeah. Please come by. I'll give you my cell number so you can text me, so I'm there when you come through.
That would be amazing.
Yeah, yeah.
What was the hardest part about starting your own?
Hardest part? Well, you know, is when we were doing the art fairs, the hardest part was getting into good art fairs. You have to jury in, send your slides, and jurors are supposed to look at your slides and not know who you are, and supposedly not know who you are, and then it's supposed to be anonymous. Setting up for this really. One of the jurors came, your work? And I said, this is my work. I thought it was somebody else's work when the jury slide came up. And I'm like, no, this is my work. And then the did phenomenally well at that show that year. The next year when I applied to that, decision we made, we weren't going to let someone else tell us when pots and how we could sell our pots. So we were going to North Dakota, make our own venue and things like that. So doing those art fairs, wonderful things. You talk to people who love your pottery. In the early years, you get really nice feedback from people. What they like, what they don't like, because they'll tell you both. And evaluate your feelings on that. The art fairs did, but spurred us to something else out. Get back as some stable moving here without some income. But Jerry has been full-time in the business for 27 years, so, and he does all the business end. So, and that's really good as an artist because I'm terrible at the business end. So you can make a partnership, or if you know a bookkeeper, all the better. So. Anything else? Well, thank you so much for coming. You're the best crowd I've ever had. So, come throw pots and. You don't actually worry about the wood floor. The what? You don't worry about the wood floor. No. Really? Oh, well, where the studio is, it's linoleum. Right. But where the kiln is, yeah, no, it's wood. Heat comes up, heat goes up, so you can put your hand underneath the. Yep, yep. So. Yeah, that was my first thought too. This is a big wood building, and the flue goes through the wall of the big wood building. So, well, thank you so very much for listening to me.